Let's continue here. President Cyril Ramaphosa has signed 3 bills into law. One of them is the Access to Information Amendment Act, which will now require political parties to be transparent about their funding. They'll have to do so every quarter and keep records for 5 years. Let's discuss this further. William Bird is from Media Monitoring Africa, which made submissions during the early stages of this process. William, it's been a long wait, but I imagine you must have some sense of relief that the President has finally signed this.
Hi, good evening. Yes, it's certainly a step in the right direction for the President to have signed this into law. Unfortunately, I don't think that the amendment goes anywhere near far enough in terms of achieving its intended and stated aims. So, in as much as there are things that require political parties to do this, there is in fact at the moment, as far as I'm aware of the draft that I've seen, that says that there will be any penalty. In other words, if political parties choose not to abide by it, then there's nothing that can force them to do so. So that's one of the weaknesses. But certainly, this is the start of beginning to look at political parties' funding and making sure that it's at least far more transparent.
So given the fact that it may not go far enough then in forcing political parties to give a full disclosure, what then for the level of transparency that this was supposed to bring?
Well, look, as I said, I think it's certainly a step in the right direction. But, you know, I think it's one of those things where this is a significant missed opportunity. So they say that there's a limit of 100,000 Rand. Well, what's to stop a private party making a donation of 50,000 Rand twice? Then, you know, in terms of that limit, there's nothing currently that would stop that from being then counted. So you just have someone who makes 10 donations of 50,000 Rand instead of one donation of 500,000, where it would have to be declared. So there's little things around like that where people can find loopholes. So instead of, you know, working and making sure that the bill's got as few loopholes as possible, this thing currently seems to have, you know, as many loopholes as your average piece of Swiss cheese.
Sure. Let's... Oh, that was quite funny, William. All right, let's then take a look in particular at what we can expect going forward in terms of what we will now be able to see about who is funding political parties.
So one of the key things is that, of course, to supplement this, the Independent Electoral Commission will come up with regulations, and we hope that that will iron out some of these potential niggles. So it may not be as poorly conceived as I've just made out. So they'll be issuing regulations that will then work to enforce that. So political parties will then have to report on a quarterly basis, you know, all of the things around the money that they've received, and that means that any member of the public would be able to go and see or get access to at least some of that information to make sure that it's transparent. And what this does is that it says that those who would seek to influence elections, in other words, people that would come and say, okay, we'll fund this political party, be they foreign actors, for example, then people would see, oh, okay, this is where they're getting their money from. We know that a lot of the controversy around our current president certainly has stemmed from who was funding the internal party elections. And I'm not sure to what degree it covers that, but certainly in terms of the electoral process, as we head towards 2021 local government elections, we should be starting to see a far higher level of transparency, and that's always a good thing.
Given how cagey political parties have previously been about their funders, do you think that it's likely that many of them will try and create alternative avenues of getting that money that doesn't go directly into the party's coffers?
Oh, I'm sure that they will, you know, and this again is not unique to South African parties at all. You know, it's the nature of political parties. So they may do it by, you know, funding things by indirectly funding their advertising. And I'm very concerned that the whole advertising thing wasn't included. So, for example, you may get a foreign actor deciding to support a particular party, and they don't give them the money, but they may then buy them, you know, millions of dollars worth of advertising on Facebook. And, you know, in terms of that, it's not a donation to the party. It may just be to support their cause. And I'm not sure that now, because political advertising hasn't been included, which is, as I said, I think profoundly unfortunate, that sort of thing isn't going to be included. So, as I said, there are loopholes, and we have to see to what extent the IEC's regulations are able to close some of those.
Sure. And in terms of kickbacks, because we often, we know and we've heard stories of how political parties have different relationships with interest groups, whether it's business, civil society, and many of these transactions, again, take place off the book. Now, with this piece of legislation, does it mean that the society is any more empowered to try and get that information than they were before?
Yes, there's no doubt. So is it where we want it to be? Not at all. But I think that certainly this is very clearly a very important step towards greater levels of transparency, because we do know, for example, that if a party gets, hundreds of millions of rands in donations or just several million rands in donations, and then you say to them, well, how did you spend that money? Because voters would be entitled to ask their political party, well, how have you spent the money that you've been donated? Can you show us your books? So just the mere fact of demanding that level of accountability and transparency in terms of their donation means that political parties are going to really have to think really hard about how they show their books to the voting public. And I would say to any voting member of the public, if a political party can't share their books with you and make sure that it matches the donations to expenditure, then you shouldn't be trusting them with your vote, let alone giving them any more power than they may already have.
All right, William Bird, let's leave it there for tonight.